The receipt fell from her suitcase like a whispered confession, a hotel bill from Phoenix when she claimed to be in Seattle. As David Mitchell stared at the paper in his hand, years of trust collapsed like a house of cards. What began as a husband's suspicion would evolve into a calculated confrontation that would send shockwaves through an entire corporation, destroy a marriage, and prove that sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom, just the unexpected knock on a hotel room door that no one saw coming. David Mitchell had never considered himself the jealous type. In 12 years of marriage to Vanessa, he'd never once checked her phone, questioned her late nights at the office, or doubted her business trips. Trust was their foundation, at least that's what he'd always believed. But foundations can crack, and David's began to fracture on a Wednesday evening in October while he was doing laundry. "Babe, got anything for the wash?" he called out, knowing Vanessa had returned from her 3-day business trip to Seattle just hours earlier. "Check my suitcase in the closet," she answered from the bathroom, the shower running. "Just not the side pocket, I've got some work receipts I need to file." David unzipped the navy blue carry-on and emptied the clothes into the hamper. As he lifted the last blouse, a white paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor. He picked it up automatically, about to stuff it back when the letterhead caught his eye. The Grand Phoenix Resort and Spa. Phoenix. Not Seattle. His eyes scanned the bill dated 2 days ago. Room service charges for 2. A Cabernet that cost more than their weekly grocery budget. The executive suite. For several long moments, David just stood there, the receipt trembling slightly in his hand. The shower continued to run, steam escaping under the door like the truth trying to break free. "Everything okay out there?" Vanessa called. David quickly stuffed the receipt into his pocket. "Yeah, just sorting colors," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. That night, as Vanessa slept beside him, David stared at the ceiling, the Phoenix receipt hidden in his nightstand drawer. He told himself there must be an explanation. Maybe she'd had a layover. Maybe the company changed her destination last minute. Maybe. But the maybes crumbled in the morning when he casually mentioned over breakfast, "How was Seattle? Rainy as usual?" "So dreary," Vanessa sighed, not looking up from her phone. "Didn't see the sun once." The weather app on David's phone showed Phoenix had been sunny and 85 degrees all week. Seattle had been, too. David took a long sip of coffee, studying his wife of 12 years. Vanessa Mitchell was a rising star at Meridian Financial, recently promoted to Senior Vice President of Client Relations. At 40, she was as stunning as the day they'd met, dark hair cut in an expensive bob, sharp green eyes always assessing, evaluating. Her ambition had always intimidated and impressed him in equal measure. "Mark worked you guys pretty hard, huh?" he asked, referring to her boss, the company's executive VP. "You know Mark," she said with a practiced eye roll. "All business, no play. Though he did take the team to a decent restaurant the last night." Another lie. The receipt showed room service at 9 p.m. on her last night. David nodded and finished his coffee, already formulating a plan. At his office at Westridge Engineering, where he worked as a project manager, David closed his door and began his investigation. First, he checked their shared credit card statements online. Vanessa's trips had become more frequent over the past 8 months, always to cities where Meridian had offices or clients: Boston, Chicago, Seattle. But checking flight confirmations in her email, they shared passwords, another foundation of trust, revealed discrepancies. Flights booked to Chicago ended up rerouted to Miami. A Boston trip somehow landed in New York. Mark Pearson, her boss, had the same travel pattern. The coincidences were too perfect. By lunch, David's stomach was too knotted to eat. By evening, he had a plan. "Another trip next week?" David asked casually as they prepared dinner, his tone betraying nothing of what he now knew. Vanessa nodded, dicing tomatoes with precise knife strokes. "Denver this time. Annual client review with Western Trust. Mark thinks we can expand their portfolio." "Mark going too?" "The whole team," she said smoothly. "We fly out Monday morning, back Thursday night." David nodded, mentally noting that she'd just implied a team trip. "Need a ride to the airport?" "No need. Car service is picking me up at 7. Later that night, as Vanessa slept beside him, David booked his own flight to Denver for Tuesday. The weekend passed in a blur of normalcy that felt surreal to David. They had dinner with friends on Saturday, Sunday brunch with her parents. Vanessa was attentive, affectionate even. If David hadn't seen the evidence himself, he would never have suspected a thing. She was just too good at compartmentalizing their life from whatever this was with Mark. Monday morning, David kissed his wife goodbye, wished her a productive trip, then called in sick to work once her car service pulled away. He tracked her phone's location, another shared setting neither had ever thought to question, and watched as the dot moved not to the international terminal but to the domestic one. 3 hours later, her location showed she had landed in San Diego, not Denver. That evening, David called her. "How's Denver?" he asked. "Cold," she replied without hesitation. "But the hotel is nice, right downtown with a view of the mountains." "Miss you," he said. "Miss you too," she answered. "Early meeting tomorrow. Better get some sleep." David hung up and finished packing his own suitcase. The San Diego flight the next morning felt like the longest of David's life. He'd taken the week off work without explanation, something he'd never done in 11 years at Westridge. His boss had sounded concerned, but David couldn't bring himself to explain. The Grand Bayview Hotel was easy to find, a towering glass structure overlooking the harbor. Vanessa's location showed she was there, had been since checking in yesterday. The same hotel chain as in Phoenix. Mark apparently had a preference. David didn't immediately go in. Instead, he sat at a cafe across the street, watching the entrance, wondering if he would see them together. He didn't. At 2 p.m., he finally entered the hotel, approaching the front desk with a confidence he didn't feel. "I'm here to surprise my wife," he told the young man at reception with a conspiratorial smile. "Vanessa Mitchell. Could you help me with her room number?" "Oh, that's so sweet," the receptionist said, tapping at his keyboard. "Let me see. Mitchell. I'm not seeing a reservation under that name. Is it possible it's under another name?" "Try Pearson," David said, his voice steady. "Mark Pearson." "Ah, yes. Mr. Pearson is in the executive suite on the 17th floor. Would you like me to call up?" No, David said quickly. "I want it to be a surprise. Can you make me a key?" "I'm sorry, sir, we can't do that without the primary guest's permission. But I can have someone escort you up if you'd like." "That won't be necessary," David replied. "I'll just text her to come down." But he didn't. Instead, he took the elevator to the 17th floor, each floor's ascent matching the rising tension in his chest. He hadn't planned exactly what he would say, what he would do. Part of him still held out hope there was an explanation, something he'd misunderstood. The executive suite was at the end of a hushed hallway. David stood before the door, his heart thundering in his chest. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. Was he ready for what came next? The confirmation of his worst fears? The end of 12 years of what he thought was a happy marriage? But if not now, when? How many more fake business trips? How many more lies over breakfast? How long had it already been happening? David knocked. For a moment, nothing. Then, footsteps. The sound of the peephole cover sliding back. A pause. "Room service," David called, lowering his voice slightly. The door opened, and there stood Mark Pearson in a hotel bathrobe, hair wet from a shower, surprise registering on his face as he recognized David. "Mitchell," he said, recovering quickly. "What are you doing here?" Before David could answer, Vanessa appeared behind Mark, wrapped in a matching robe, her face draining of color as she saw her husband. "David," she whispered, the single word carrying shock, fear, and the immediate understanding that everything was about to change. "Honey," David said with remarkable calm, "I thought I'd surprise you in Denver. Seems like we both got the cities mixed up." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Hotel guests walked past, oblivious to the implosion happening in the doorway of the executive suite. Mark found his voice first. "David, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" David replied, his eyebrow raised. "Because it looks exactly like the senior vice president of Meridian Financial is having an affair with his married subordinate while charging luxury hotel rooms to the company expense account. But please, tell me what it actually is." Vanessa stepped forward. "David, please, can we talk about this privately? Like you talked about your trip to Denver? Or was it Seattle last week? Or maybe Phoenix the month before that?" With each city, her face fell further. "I'm sorry, am I confusing the lies? It's hard to keep track." Mark's face had transformed from embarrassment to something harder. "Mitchell, I think you should leave before this gets ugly. Vanessa and I will talk with you when we get back. This is a professional trip that." "Save it," David cut him off. "I've seen the receipts, the room service for two, the locations that never match where she's supposed to be. I'm not here for explanations. I'm here to let you both know that I know. And to deliver some news of my own." David reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "While doing my little investigation, I discovered some interesting financial discrepancies in the expenses you've been filing, Mark. The company paid for luxury suites, but the corporate policy clearly states standard rooms only. There's the matter of the $300 bottles of wine, spa treatments, and personal shopping trips, all coded as client entertainment when no clients were present. Mark's face paled. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" David turned the phone around to show a spreadsheet detailing months of expenses, all meticulously categorized. "I sent this to your CFO this morning, and the board. From an anonymous email, of course." They seemed very interested. Vanessa stepped forward, her shock giving way to anger. "You had no right." "No right?" David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's rich coming from you right now. You've just made a huge mistake," Mark growled, stepping toward David menacingly. "No, your huge mistake was thinking I was too trusting to notice, too passive to act. You're both so used to managing perceptions, crafting narratives, that you forgot some people still value the truth." David stepped back into the hallway. "I'll be filing for divorce when I get back to Boston, Vanessa. I've already moved my things out. And Mark, I hear the board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Might want to cut your business trip short." With that, David turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving the two of them standing frozen in the doorway. As the elevator doors closed, David exhaled deeply, surprised to find he felt not devastation, but relief. The weight of suspicion and doubt had been crushing him for weeks. Now, at least, there was clarity. His phone buzzed, a text from Vanessa. "David, please let me explain." Another buzz. From a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Thomas Reed, General Counsel at Meridian Financial. Please call me at your earliest convenience regarding the information you provided." David silenced his phone as the elevator reached the lobby. He had a flight to catch, a new life to begin, and a story to tell his friends that no one would believe: how he caught his wife on a fake business trip by showing up at her hotel room door, and how her boss never saw it coming. The flight back to Boston felt different. David stared at the clouds below, ignoring his vibrating phone. 37 missed calls from Vanessa. 18 texts. 3 voicemails. He'd listen eventually, but not now. Now was for processing. "Another drink, sir?" the flight attendant asked, gesturing to his empty scotch. "No, thank you," David replied, surprising himself. The old David would have needed liquid courage. The new David, born in that hotel hallway an hour ago, felt oddly clear-headed. By landing, his phone showed a new email from Thomas Reed, General Counsel at Meridian Financial, requesting an urgent meeting. David agreed to 9 a.m. tomorrow. The Uber ride to Michael's apartment in Cambridge was quiet. His brother had been the only person David told about his suspicions. He'd offered his spare bedroom without hesitation. "So you actually did it," Michael said when David walked through the door. No hug, just acknowledgement of the nuclear bomb David had detonated in his life. "Yep." David collapsed onto the couch. "Caught them at the Grand Bayview in San Diego." Michael handed him a beer. "How'd she take it?" "Like she was seeing a ghost. Mark tried to intimidate me. That didn't work out for him." "And the company stuff? You really sent it all to the higher-ups?" David nodded. "Meeting their lawyer tomorrow." He finally scrolled through Vanessa's messages. "David, please let me explain. It's not what you think. Please call me. Where are you staying? This is going to destroy both our careers." Mark is furious. "What did you send to the board? Please just talk to me." The progression was telling, from please for understanding to worry about her job. The last message: "I'm flying back tonight. I'll be at the house. She's waiting for me at home," David said. Michael frowned. "You're not going, are you?" "No." The next conversation happens with lawyers present. That night, David slept surprisingly well. When his alarm sounded at 7 a.m., he showered, borrowed one of Michael's ties, and headed downtown to Meridian Financial. Thomas Reed was sharp-featured with silver hair and calculating eyes. He escorted David to a conference room where 2 others waited: Barbara Chen, head of HR, and Walter Grayson, Meridian's CEO. "Mr. Mitchell," Grayson said, "quite a situation you brought to our attention. I thought it was important your company knew how certain executives were spending shareholders' money." David replied calmly. "Indeed. Mr. Reed has reviewed the documentation you provided. Very thorough work." Reed cleared his throat. "Mr. Mitchell, are you planning legal action against Meridian Financial?" David looked each of them in the eye. "My issue isn't with Meridian. It's with Mark Pearson and my wife. What they did on company time using company resources is between them and you." Chen leaned forward. "We appreciate your discretion in bringing this directly to us rather than making it public." David caught the subtle warning. They feared scandal headlines. Executive VP caught in affair with subordinate, misused company funds. "I have no interest in publicity," David assured them. "My only interest was the truth." Grayson nodded. "We've already spoken with both Mr. Pearson and Mrs. Mitchell. Their explanations were less than convincing." And their employment status? David couldn't help asking. The executives exchanged glances before Reed answered. The board takes financial impropriety extremely seriously. And the company's code of conduct is very clear about relationships between supervisors and subordinates, Chen added. David understood what wasn't being said. Heads would roll. We'd like to offer you something in return for your cooperation and continued discretion, Grayson said, sliding a folder across the table. David didn't open it. I'm not looking for a payoff. Not a payoff, Grayson corrected. Compensation for being unwittingly entangled in a situation that violated our policies. We'd also appreciate your signature on a non-disclosure agreement. I'll have my lawyer review this, David said, taking the folder. Outside the building, he checked his watch, 9:47 a.m. His entire meeting with the top brass of a multi-billion-dollar firm had taken less than an hour. In that time, they'd confirmed that both Mark and Vanessa would be fired, and had tried to buy his silence. His phone buzzed with a text from Michael. News on your wife? David replied. Meeting went as expected. They're handling it internally. What about your job? Michael wrote back. Good question. In the chaos of exposing Vanessa and Mark, David hadn't thought about his own professional situation. He'd taken an unexplained week off, something he'd never done in 11 years at Westridge Engineering. He called his boss, Carla Winters. David, she answered. Are you okay? We've been worried. I'm dealing with some personal issues, he said carefully. Take whatever time you need. The Hartwell project can wait until next week. After hanging up, David wandered to Boston Common, finding an empty bench. He opened the folder Grayson had given him. Inside was a check for $75,000 and an NDA stating that in exchange for payment, he would never discuss Mark Pearson's financial improprieties or relationship with Vanessa. No mention of his wife's career or severance. They'd hung her out to dry. His phone rang. Vanessa. This time, he answered. David, thank God, she started. Where are you? We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you right now. They fired me, David. 12 years with the company, and they called me a liability. Mark tried to blame it all on me, said I manipulated the expenses, that I pursued him. Did they believe him? No, she admitted. They fired both of us, but he's getting a severance package. I'm getting nothing. That's a Mark and Vanessa problem, not a David problem. How can you be so cold? I made a terrible mistake. A mistake? David interrupted. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was make thousands of deliberate choices to deceive me and betray our marriage. Were you planning to leave me for him? The silence answered his question. It wasn't simple, Vanessa finally said. Mark had plans for us to relocate to the West Coast. But I was afraid to tell you. How considerate. David, please. I've lost everything today. I'm filing for divorce, David said firmly. My lawyer will be in touch. He hung up and blocked her number. 12 years of marriage ended in a 3-minute call. David's phone buzzed with an email notification. Termination of employment, effective immediately. His stomach dropped as he read the message from Carla Winters. David. It has come to our attention that you have engaged in corporate espionage against Meridian Financial, a valued client. Effective immediately, your employment with Westridge is terminated. Sincerely, Carla Winters, Director of Operations, Westridge Engineering. David read it 3 times. Corporate espionage? He hadn't stolen any trade secrets, he'd simply exposed misconduct. His phone rang, an unknown number. Mr. Mitchell? Thomas Reed from Meridian. I've just received a disturbing call from Walter Grayson. It seems the NDA we offered isn't going to work. What do you mean? And why is Westridge firing me for corporate espionage? That would be Mark Pearson's doing. Before we could escort him from the building, he called the CEO of Westridge, Philip Barron. They're golf buddies. So Pearson gets me fired as revenge? For exposing his affair and fraud? How is that legal? Technically, you accessed confidential financial records you weren't authorized to see. I didn't hack anything. I found discrepancies in expense reports on my wife's laptop. We share an office at home. Nevertheless, the appearance of impropriety is there. Mr. Pearson is alleging you deliberately went looking for ways to sabotage him. That's backwards. I found the financial issues while investigating the affair. I believe you, Reed said, surprising David. But Mr. Pearson has powerful friends, and he's determined to make this messy. So I've lost my job for doing the right thing? For now, yes, Reed admitted. But I'd suggest you retain legal counsel immediately. After hanging up, David stood frozen in Boston Common. In 24 hours, he'd lost his wife, his job, and any semblance of normalcy, all because he'd exposed the truth. His phone buzzed. Dude, what the hell? Your wife showed up at my apartment looking for you. David texted back, I've been fired. Don't tell her where I am. Mark Pearson had escalated this from a personal betrayal to all-out war, and David was woefully unprepared for the battlefield. As he walked toward the T-station, David's phone rang again, another unknown number. Mr. Mitchell? Sophia Vasquez from the Boston Globe. I understand you were terminated from Westridge after exposing financial improprieties at Meridian. Would you care to comment? How did you get this information? I have sources at both companies. This story will break with or without your input. Don't you want your side heard? David thought about the NDA, about Reed's warning, about how quickly Mark had mobilized his connections to destroy his career. Actually, Ms. Vasquez, David said, I have quite a lot to say. Can we meet? Starbucks on Boylston in 20 minutes. I'll be there. If Mark Pearson wanted war, he'd get one. David had nothing left to lose. Sophia Vasquez arrived precisely on time, sharp-eyed with a notebook and a no-nonsense demeanor. Before we start, David asked, how much do you already know? I know that Mark Pearson and Vanessa Mitchell were terminated for inappropriate conduct and financial improprieties. I know you're Vanessa's husband and were fired from Westridge. The rest is unclear. David nodded. Someone at Meridian had tipped her off. What if I told you this isn't just about an office affair? What if I told you it's about systematic abuse of corporate funds, about a powerful executive who used company money to finance an affair with his subordinate, and about how he's now using his connections to destroy the person who exposed him? Sophia's eyes lit up. That's exactly the story I'm looking for. For the next hour, David laid out everything, finding the receipt, tracking Vanessa's locations, discovering the financial discrepancies, confronting them in San Diego, and the swift retribution that had cost him his job. When he finished, Sophia looked up with determination. Going public means there's no going back. Your personal life, your marriage, it all becomes public record. I understand, David said. But Mark Pearson doesn't get to win by bullying everyone into silence. The story broke at 5 a.m. on the Boston Globe's website. Corporate cover-up, sex, lies, and expense accounts at Meridian Financial. By 9 a.m., David's phone was ringing constantly with calls from journalists and unknown numbers. The article was more damning than expected. Sophia had found 2 former Meridian employees who confirmed Mark's history of inappropriate relationships with subordinates and previous financial irregularities. David's phone buzzed. You have no idea what you've just done. Prepare for war. Another text came from Thomas Reed, my office, 2 p.m. Urgent. When David arrived at Meridian, Reed led him to a small office where Walter Grayson and an older man waited. Mr. Mitchell, this is Harrison Meridian, chairman of the board and majority shareholder. The older man studied David coldly. You've created quite a mess, young man. With all due respect, sir, I didn't create this mess. I exposed it. The PR nightmare you've created is affecting our stock price. Again, I didn't create this situation. Your executive VP did. We're prepared to offer you $500,000 in exchange for a statement walking back aspects of the Globe article. David didn't even consider it. Not interested. Be reasonable, Reed urged. Your career has already suffered. My career suffered because your company allowed an executive to abuse his position and then retaliate against a whistleblower, David said firmly. I want accountability, not money. As David walked out, his phone rang. Sophia Vasquez. I'm hearing rumors that Mark Pearson has been fired and that Meridian's board is in emergency meetings. Care to comment? David smiled slightly. Let's just say the story is still developing. And Sophia? Call me David. David, then. 3 more women have come forward with similar stories about Mark Pearson. I think there's a follow-up story here that's even bigger than the first. David realized his personal tragedy had evolved into something much larger, something that might actually lead to real change. I'm in, he told her. Whatever helps bring the truth to light. The real war was just beginning. The following week unfolded like a fever dream. David's face appeared on morning shows, business news segments, and across social media. The hashtag #Meridian2 began trending as more women came forward with stories about Mark Pearson and a corporate culture that protected powerful men. This is insane, David told Michael as they watched another cable news segment discussing the Meridian financial scandal. You've struck a nerve, Michael replied, handing his brother a beer. People are fed up with executives getting away with this stuff. The anchor was interviewing a woman named Jennifer Lawson, a former Meridian employee who had left after what she described as persistent harassment from Mark. I filed complaints with HR, she was saying. They were ignored. I was told Mr. Pearson was too valuable to the company, that I should consider transferring departments if I was uncomfortable. David's phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Jennifer is the 5th former employee to come forward. This is becoming a pattern. He texted back, any word from Meridian leadership? Press conference scheduled for tomorrow. Sources say major changes coming. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Michael went to answer it, returning with a serious expression. It's for you, he said. Vanessa. David set down his beer, surprised. Tell her I'm not interested in talking. Michael shook his head. She says it's important. Something about Mark threatening her. Against his better judgment, David went to the door. Vanessa stood on the porch looking nothing like the polished executive he'd known. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face bare of makeup, eyes rimmed red from crying. What do you want, Vanessa? He asked, not inviting her in. Can we talk, please? Not about us, that ship has sailed, I know. She hugged herself as if cold. It's about Mark. He's been calling me, texting, threatening me. Threatening you how? He says if I talk to the press, he'll make sure I never work in finance again. That he has, compromising photos. That he'll release them. David's jaw clenched. Charming guy you left me for. Vanessa flinched. I deserve that. But David, he's unhinged. He showed up at the house last night, pounding on the door, screaming that this is all my fault for not controlling my husband. Despite everything, David felt a flicker of concern. Did you call the police? Yes. By the time they arrived, he was gone. She looked up, meeting his eyes. The officer said I should consider a restraining order, but that I needed documentation of the threats. I deleted the texts in a panic. So what do you want from me? He's been texting you too, hasn't he? The police said it would strengthen my case if we could show a pattern. David had indeed received several unhinged messages from Mark. He'd saved them, planning to use them if legal action materialized. I'll forward the messages to the police, he said finally. But that's all I'm willing to do. Thank you, Vanessa said, her shoulders relaxing slightly. And David? I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I am sorry. For all of it. You're right, he replied, already turning away. It doesn't mean anything now. He closed the door, trying to ignore the complicated emotions her visit had stirred up. Back in the living room, Michael raised an eyebrow. Everything okay? Fine, David said, reaching for his phone. Just need to forward some threatening texts to the police. For Vanessa? For evidence. David began scrolling through the messages. Seems Mark Pearson is handling his downfall with all the grace and dignity one would expect. The most recent text was particularly disturbing. This isn't over, Mitchell. You've taken everything from me. Now I'll take everything from you. Watch your back. After forwarding the messages to the police, David found himself staring at his phone, a strange unease settling over him. Mark's threats had seemed like empty bluster before, the desperate flailing of a man whose power had been stripped away. But what if they weren't? His thoughts were interrupted by a call from Sofia Vasquez. David, have you been watching the news? Just turned it off. Why? Meridian Financial's stock has dropped 18% since the scandal broke. There are rumors the board is considering replacing both the CEO and the entire executive team. Good, David said firmly. The rot starts at the top. There's something else, Sophia continued, her voice taking on a cautious tone. I heard from a source at Westridge Engineering. Your former boss, Carla Winters, has resigned. David sat up straighter. Resigned or resigned? Full-on quit in protest, apparently. Sent an all-company email saying she refused to work for an organization that terminated employees for reporting ethical violations. Sophia paused. She copied the board on the email. That was unexpected. David had assumed Carla had been complicit in his firing, following orders from above. The thought that she'd stood up for him, even after the fact, was genuinely moving. His phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Just saw the SEC news. You really started something, bro. Mom and Dad would be proud. After hanging up, David found Sophia's email with Carla's resignation letter attached. It was blistering in its condemnation of Westridge's leadership. In my 15 years with this company, I have never witnessed such a flagrant disregard for ethical principles. David Mitchell was one of our most valued employees, dedicated, honest, and principled. His termination for exposing financial improprieties was not just wrong, it was cowardly. David forwarded the email to his lawyer, Ellen Shapiro, whom he'd retained the day after the Boston Globe story broke. Ellen had been cautiously optimistic about David's chances of winning a wrongful termination suit against Westridge, but Carla's letter could be a game-changer. His phone rang almost immediately. This is exactly what we needed, Ellen said without preamble. A senior executive openly stating that your termination was retaliatory and unjustified. What does this mean for the case? It means Westridge just lost their best defense. I'm drafting a demand letter now, reinstatement with back pay, a public apology, and compensation for damages to your reputation. And if they refuse? Then we file suit and take them to court, Ellen said confidently. But between this letter and the public relations nightmare they're facing, I suspect they'll be eager to settle. The Meridian press conference the next morning exceeded all expectations. Barbara Chen, looking formidable in a tailored navy suit, announced not just leadership changes but a complete restructuring of the company's reporting mechanisms for harassment and ethics violations. The events of the past week have made it clear that Meridian Financial has failed in its responsibility to ensure a safe, ethical workplace for all employees, she stated firmly. That changes today. Most surprising was the announcement of a $20 million settlement fund for current and former employees who had experienced harassment or discrimination at the company. This fund will be administered by an independent third party, Chen explained, and signing a settlement agreement will not require confidentiality. We believe sunshine is the best disinfectant. The business press was calling it unprecedented. Wall Street analysts were divided on whether it represented responsible corporate governance or an unnecessary financial burden. But the court of public opinion seemed firmly on Meridian's side. The company's stock, which had been in free fall, stabilized by mid-afternoon. David watched it all unfold on Michael's television, feeling a complicated mix of vindication and disbelief. What had started with a hotel receipt found in a suitcase had grown into something that was reshaping an entire industry. His phone buzzed with a call from Thomas Reed. "Mr. Mitchell," the lawyer began, sounding significantly warmer than during their last interaction. "I wanted to inform you personally that Meridian Financial will be issuing a public statement acknowledging your role in bringing these matters to light." "That's not necessary," David said, surprised. "On the contrary, we believe it is very necessary. The statement will clarify that you acted ethically in reporting financial improprieties, and that any suggestions of corporate espionage were unfounded. We will also be reaching out to Westridge Engineering to set the record straight regarding your termination." "That's unexpectedly decent of you." Ms. Chen believes in giving credit where it's due. "She also asked me to inquire whether you might be interested in consulting with us on the implementation of our new ethics policies." The offer was so unexpected that David almost laughed. "You want to hire me? After everything that's happened?" "We want your perspective," Reed clarified. "As someone who is willing to stand up for what's right, regardless of personal cost." "I'll need to think about it," David replied honestly. After hanging up, David sat for a long time, processing this latest development. The universe had a strange sense of humor. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a betrayed husband confronting his wife's lover in a hotel room. Now he was being offered a consulting position at the very company where the affair had taken place. His phone rang again. "Ellen Shapiro." "They've agreed to everything," Ellen said without preamble. "Reinstatement with back pay, a public apology, and a confidential settlement for damages." "Everything? Just like that?" "Meridian's legal department reached out to them first, clarifying that you had acted appropriately in reporting financial improprieties." Westridge's position became untenable at that point. David shook his head in disbelief. "So I've got my job back?" "If you want it," Ellen confirmed. "Though between us, I think you could aim higher now. Your profile in the industry has expanded considerably." Just as he ended the call, David's phone buzzed with another text. "You've destroyed me. Now I destroy you. Look out your window." The hairs on the back of David's neck stood up as he moved cautiously to Michael's living room window. The apartment overlooked a small neighborhood park across the street. Standing directly under a streetlight, staring up at the building, was Mark Pearson. Even from 5 floors up, David could see the disheveled appearance, the wild eyes. Mark looked nothing like the polished executive who had opened that hotel door in San Diego. He looked dangerous. David stepped back from the window and called the police. "There's a man outside my building who has been threatening me," he told the dispatcher, giving them Mark's description and location. "Officers are on their way," the dispatcher assured him. "Please stay inside and away from the windows." David's phone buzzed again. "Come down and face me like a man. Or are you a coward like your whore wife?" He didn't respond, instead watching through a side window as police cruisers arrived. 2 officers approached Mark, who gesticulated wildly. When one officer reached for him, Mark shoved him back violently. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Mark reached into his jacket. One officer drew his weapon. There was a brief, chaotic struggle. Then Mark was on the ground, officers kneeling over him. David's phone rang, the building doorman. Mr. Mitchell? There's been an incident outside. Police are asking if you can come down to make a statement. 10 minutes later, David stood in the building's lobby speaking with a detective. Mark Pearson had been arrested for assaulting a police officer and carrying a concealed weapon without a permit. He had a gun? David asked, stunned. A loaded .38, the detective confirmed. And your address written on a piece of paper in his pocket. Given the threatening messages you reported, we're looking at charges for stalking and intimidation as well. David felt lightheaded. Mark hadn't just been making empty threats, he'd been genuinely planning something violent. We'll need formal statements from both you and your wife, the detective continued. The text you forwarded earlier will be helpful. My wife and I are separated, David clarified. She's been receiving threats from him as well. The detective nodded, making a note. In the meantime, I'd suggest staying somewhere else for a few days, just as a precaution. After giving his statement, David called Michael to update him, then packed a small overnight bag. He'd take the detective's advice and find a hotel for a few days. As he waited for his Uber, his phone buzzed with a news alert. Former Meridian executive arrested outside apartment building. David's phone rang. Sofia Vasquez. Are you okay? She asked immediately. I just heard about Mark Pearson's arrest. I'm fine, David assured her. Shaken, but fine. He never made it into the building. Thank God, Sofia said, genuine relief in her voice. The man clearly snapped. Yeah. David paused. Sofia, I need a favor. Can you check on Vanessa, make sure she's safe? Mark has been threatening her too. Say no more, Sofia replied. I'll reach out to her right away. After hanging up, David realized he was genuinely concerned for Vanessa's safety. Despite everything, he didn't wish her harm. The Uber arrived, and David directed the driver to a hotel in Cambridge, far from both Michael's apartment and his house. As they drove, his phone buzzed with another news alert. Breaking, Westridge Engineering CEO Philip Barron resigns amid controversy over whistleblower firing. The dominoes were still falling. At the hotel, David checked in under his brother's name, using cash rather than a credit card. The detective's warning about possible accomplices had left him feeling justifiably paranoid. Once settled in his room, he finally allowed himself to process the events of the day. Mark Pearson, former executive VP of a major financial firm, had shown up outside an apartment building with a loaded gun, apparently intent on harming him. It was so far beyond what David had imagined when he'd knocked on that hotel room door in San Diego. His phone buzzed with a text from Sofia. Spoke with Vanessa. She's safe, staying with her sister in Brookline. Police have contacted her about Mark's arrest. Thanks for checking, David replied, relieved despite himself. Another text came through, this one from Vanessa. Heard about what happened with Mark. Are you okay? It was the first direct communication he'd had with her since her visit to Michael's apartment. David considered not responding, but something compelled him to type, I'm fine. Police have him in custody. Stay safe. Her reply came quickly. I'm so sorry, David. For everything. This is all my fault. David didn't respond. Was it her fault? Partly, yes. But Mark's actions were his own. The man had chosen to throw away his career, his reputation, and now potentially his freedom, all because he couldn't handle being held accountable. As David tried to sleep that night, he found himself thinking about the strange journey that had brought him here. From betrayed husband to corporate whistleblower to the catalyst for industry-wide change, all because of one hotel receipt that fell from a suitcase. He wondered what would have happened if he'd never found that receipt. Would Vanessa and Mark have continued their affair indefinitely? Would the financial improprieties have gone undiscovered? Would those other women at Meridian have remained silent about their experiences? Sometimes, David realized, the hardest truths were the ones most needed. And sometimes, the most painful moments in our lives could lead to the most meaningful change, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. With that thought, David finally drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. 6 months later, David Mitchell stood at a podium in the Hyatt Regency, addressing the Financial Industry Ethics Symposium. The systems we build, he told the audience of executives and compliance officers, are only as ethical as the safeguards we put in place to protect those who speak up when things go wrong. The room was silent, all eyes fixed on him. 6 months ago, he'd been an unknown project manager at an engineering firm. Now he was keynote speaker at one of the industry's most prestigious gatherings, introduced as the whistleblower who changed Wall Street. The transformation still felt surreal. The Meridian financial case wasn't unique, David continued. What made it different was that it became public. How many similar situations are happening right now? At firms represented in this room, that will never see the light of day because employees fear retaliation more than they trust the system to protect them? A ripple of uncomfortable shifting spread through the audience. Good, David thought. Discomfort precedes change. That's why today, I'm announcing the formation of the Corporate Accountability Project, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting whistleblowers across all industries and advocating for stronger protections at both the corporate and legislative levels. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Not everyone was enthusiastic. David could see several executives exchanging skeptical glances, but the tide of public opinion was firmly on his side. After the presentation, David found himself surrounded by attendees eager to share their own stories or pledge support to the new initiative. Among them was Barbara Chen, now Meridian Financial's permanent CEO. "Impressive speech," she said, shaking David's hand. "Though I noticed you didn't mention your personal connection to the Meridian case." David nodded. "This isn't about me or what happened with Vanessa and Mark. It's about the systemic issues that allowed their behavior to flourish undetected for so long." "Speaking of Mark," Chen said, lowering her voice slightly, "I thought you'd want to know. He took a plea deal yesterday. 5 years for the financial fraud charges, with the stalking and weapons charges to be served concurrently." "Only 5 years?" David was surprised. "He gave up names," Chen explained. "Apparently, the financial improprieties went higher than anyone suspected. The SEC is investigating 3 former board members, including Harrison Meridian." That was unexpected. Harrison Meridian had been one of the most respected figures in finance, his name synonymous with old money and establishment power. "And Vanessa?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. "Has she reached out to Meridian about the settlement fund for former employees?" Chen's expression softened slightly. "She did, yes. But she declined any financial compensation. She's participating in the third-party review of our HR practices instead, providing testimony about her experiences." David wasn't sure how he felt about that. The divorce had been finalized 4 months ago, and he'd had no contact with Vanessa since. Her choice to forego compensation but contribute to institutional reform seemed consistent with the person she claimed to be becoming. As Chen moved on to speak with other attendees, David felt a light touch on his arm. He turned to find Sofia Vasquez, looking elegant in a tailored blazer, press credentials hanging around her neck. "Quite the speech, Mitchell," she said, a teasing note in her voice. "You actually made a room full of banking executives applaud for stronger whistleblower protections. That's talent." David smiled. His friendship with Sofia had deepened over the months, evolving from source and journalist to something more personal. They'd had dinner several times, ostensibly to discuss her ongoing coverage of the Meridian case, but the conversations had increasingly wandered to other topics. "Just appealing to their enlightened self-interest," he replied. "Better to embrace change voluntarily than have it forced upon them by regulators or scandal." Sofia nodded, then glanced at her watch. "I need to file my story, but we're still on for dinner?" "Absolutely. 7 o'clock at Soralina." After Sofia left, David checked his messages. Among them was an email from Ellen, his divorce attorney. "David, just wanted to let you know that Vanessa's attorney contacted me this morning. She's waiving her right to any adjustment in the asset division, despite the increased value of your consulting business and the nonprofit launch. Said to tell you she wishes you every success. I've never seen a divorce this amicable after infidelity. Either she's the most remorseful cheater in history, or she's playing a very long game. Best, Ellen." David stared at the message, unsure how to feel. Ellen's cynicism was understandable. She'd built her career on acrimonious divorces, but David was inclined to believe Vanessa's remorse was genuine. Not that it changed anything between them. His phone buzzed with another message, from his security detail. "All clear at the restaurant for tonight. Table secured in back corner, good sightlines, private exit available if needed." David smiled slightly. Meridian had maintained the security detail long after the immediate threat from Mark Pearson had passed. At first, David had found it excessive, but he'd grown to appreciate the professional thoroughness, especially as his public profile had risen. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of networking, interviews, and planning sessions for the nonprofit launch. By the time David arrived at Soralina, he was exhausted but exhilarated. The response to the project announcement had exceeded his most optimistic projections. Sofia was already at the table when he arrived, nursing a glass of red wine. "Sorry I'm late," David said, taking the seat across from her. "The symposium ran over." "I figured," Sofia replied, sliding a glass toward him. "I took the liberty of ordering your usual." David took a sip of the Macallan Neat, appreciating the familiar burn. "Perfect. Thanks." So, Sophia leaned forward, her reporter's instinct for a story never quite turning off. Harrison Meridian under SEC investigation. That's going to shake up the entire industry. You heard? I broke the story, Sophia corrected with a smile. Going live on the Globe's website at midnight. Chin gave me the exclusive. Smart woman, David acknowledged. Better to control the narrative from the start. They ordered dinner, and conversation flowed easily between them, touching on the symposium, the nonprofit launch, and Sophia's upcoming feature series on workplace misconduct across different industries. I've been thinking, Sophia said as they shared a tiramisu for dessert, this story isn't over yet. The Meridian case? David asked. Your story, Sophia clarified. The whistleblower turned advocate. The man who turned personal betrayal into systemic change. There's a book there, David. David nearly choked on his espresso. A book? About me? About the case, the aftermath, the movement it spawned. Sophia's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Part corporate exposé, part personal journey. It could reach people who would never read a business ethics textbook. I don't know, David hedged, uncomfortable with the spotlight being turned so directly on his personal life. The divorce, the affair, that's all still pretty raw. Sophia reached across the table, her hand covering his briefly. I understand. It's just something to consider. As dinner concluded and they stepped out into the cool Boston evening, David found himself in the strange position of being both entirely different from the man he'd been 6 months ago and yet more authentically himself than ever before. The betrayal had stripped away pretenses, forcing him to rebuild on a foundation of genuine values and purpose. Walk you home, he offered, noting that Sophia's apartment was only a few blocks away. She smiled, linking her arm through his. I'd like that. Kevin Donnelly, his security detail, followed at a discreet distance, professional as always. Another change David had adapted to, the constant awareness of security, of potential threats. The price of speaking truth to power. I've been offered a position at the New York Times, Sophia said suddenly as they walked. Investigative reporting, financial sector focus. It's a big step up. David felt an unexpected pang at the news. That's wonderful. Congratulations. I haven't accepted yet, she continued. I wanted to talk to you first. Me? Why? Sophia stopped walking, turning to face him. Because in the past 6 months, you've become important to me, David. More than just a source or a friend. And I need to know if I'm alone in feeling that way before I make any decisions about moving to New York. The directness of her statement caught David off guard. In the aftermath of his divorce, romance had been the furthest thing from his mind. Yet here was Sophia, intelligent, principled, fearless Sophia, telling him she felt something deeper than friendship. And if he was honest with himself, so did he. You're not alone, he said finally. But I'm not sure I'm ready for, whatever this might be. I'm still sorting through a lot. Sophia nodded, understanding in her eyes. I know. I'm not asking for promises, just honesty. How long do you have to decide? David asked. 2 weeks. Then let's use that time, he suggested. Figure out what this is, what we want it to be. Sophia smiled, the expression warming her serious face. The whistleblower's approach. Gather all the information before taking action. As they continued walking, David's phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. SEC investigating Harrison Meridian, former Meridian financial chairman. The ripple effects of that hotel room confrontation were still expanding, touching lives and institutions far beyond what he could have imagined 6 months ago. At Sophia's building, they paused again. Want to come up for coffee? She asked, her tone making it clear that the invitation was just for coffee, nothing more. I'd like that, David replied. But I should probably get home. Big day tomorrow with the nonprofit launch. Sophia nodded, then leaned in and kissed him lightly on the cheek. Good night, David. And for what it's worth, what you did today, announcing the Corporate Accountability Project, it matters. You're changing things for the better. After Sophia disappeared into her building, David turned toward the SUV where Kevin waited to drive him to his new apartment in Cambridge. All good, sir? Kevin asked as David settled into the back seat. All good, David confirmed, surprised to find he meant it. The drive to Cambridge gave David time to reflect on the day's developments. The symposium speech, the SEC investigation, Sophia's job offer and her candid admission of feelings for him, it was a lot to process. As the SUV pulled up to his building, David noticed a figure sitting on the steps. For a moment, his heart rate spiked, memories of Mark Pearson's threats flashing through his mind. But as Kevin tensed beside him, ready for potential trouble, David recognized the visitor. Vanessa. Sir? Kevin asked, clearly concerned about the unexpected presence of David's ex-wife. "It's okay," David assured him. "But stay close, just in case." David approached cautiously, watching as Vanessa stood, hands thrust deep in her coat pockets against the autumn chill. "What are you doing here?" he asked, not hostile but not particularly welcoming either. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," she said, her voice steady but uncertain. "I saw your speech today. At the symposium. You were there?" David was surprised. The financial industry had largely ostracized Vanessa after the scandal broke. "Barbara Chen invited me," Vanessa explained. "She thought it might be instructive for my work with the women's advocacy group." David nodded, waiting for her to continue, to explain why she was sitting on his doorstep at nearly 11 at night. "I wanted to tell you in person," Vanessa said finally, "how proud I am of what you're doing. The Corporate Accountability Project, it's going to help so many people." "Thank you," David replied, still puzzled. "But you could have sent an email." Vanessa took a deep breath. "I'm leaving Boston. Taking a position with a global nonprofit in Geneva. Working on gender equity in financial services internationally." "Congratulations," David said, genuinely meaning it. "That sounds like important work." "It is." Vanessa's eyes met his directly. "I wanted to see you before I left, to say goodbye properly, and to give you this." She pulled an envelope from her pocket and held it out. David took it cautiously. "It's not dramatic," Vanessa assured him with a small, sad smile. "Just a letter. Things I wanted to say but couldn't find the right moment for. You can read it, or burn it, or whatever feels right to you." David looked at the envelope, then back at his ex-wife. 6 months ago, he'd been planning their anniversary trip. Now they were strangers with a painful shared history, their paths diverging completely. "When do you leave?" he asked. "Tomorrow afternoon." David nodded, tucking the envelope into his jacket pocket. "I wish you well, Vanessa." "I mean that." "I know you do," she replied quietly. "That's who you are. Who you've always been. I just lost sight of that somewhere along the way." With that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the night before David could respond. Inside his apartment, David set the unopened letter on his coffee table and poured himself a small whiskey. The day had been full of unexpected developments, and his mind was struggling to process them all. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Made it home safe. Thinking about our conversation. No pressure, but I'm glad we're being honest with each other." David smiled, typing back, "Me too. Breakfast tomorrow before the launch event?" "It's a date," came the immediate reply, followed by a winking emoji. David set his phone down and glanced at Vanessa's letter. He wasn't ready to read it tonight. Maybe not tomorrow either. But someday, when the wounds had fully healed, he'd want to know what she felt was important enough to deliver in person on the eve of her departure. For now, though, his focus was on the future, the non-profit launch, the potential with Sophia, the new life he was building from the ashes of betrayal. The Corporate Accountability Project launch the next morning exceeded all expectations. Held in a converted warehouse space in South Boston, the event drew hundreds of attendees, from corporate compliance officers to former whistleblowers whose stories had inspired David's vision. "This isn't just about protecting individuals who speak up," David explained to the gathered crowd. "Though that's certainly part of it. It's about changing corporate culture from the inside out, creating environments where ethical behavior is rewarded rather than punished." As he spoke, David spotted Sophia near the back of the room, her expression warm and encouraging. They'd had breakfast together before the event, a quiet, comfortable meal where they'd talked about everything and nothing, both aware of the potential unfolding between them but content to let it develop naturally. After the event, as David was packing up his presentation materials, his phone buzzed with an email notification, an offer on his former house, well above asking price. Another step forward, another piece of the old life making way for the new. David accepted the offer with a tap, then looked around at the bustling room filled with people committed to corporate accountability and ethical leadership. People inspired by what had begun as his personal tragedy but had evolved into something much larger and more significant. His wife's work trips might have been fake, and her boss certainly hadn't expected David at that hotel room door. But what had emerged from that moment of confrontation was absolutely real, a reckoning long overdue, not just for Mark and Vanessa, but for an entire system built on power imbalances and selective accountability. And David, unexpected catalyst that he was, found himself strangely grateful for the journey, painful though it had been. Because sometimes, it takes losing everything to discover what you're truly capable of building from the ruins. That evening, as David and Sophia walked to dinner, she asked the question that had been on both their minds. "So, did you read the letter?" David shook his head. Not yet. Some doors are better left closed for a while. Sophia nodded. And what about new doors? The ones opening now? David took her hand in his, a simple gesture that felt both significant and natural. Those, he said with a smile, I'm very interested in exploring. As they continued down the street, David realized that the receipt that had fallen from Vanessa's suitcase 6 months ago had been more than evidence of betrayal. It had been the first page in a new chapter of his life, a chapter that, despite its painful beginning, promised to be more authentic, more purposeful, and ultimately more fulfilling than anything that had come before. The story that began with deception was ending with truth. The path that started with betrayal had led to integrity. And the man who had once been a victim had transformed into something much more powerful, an agent of change. Sometimes, David thought as he squeezed Sophia's hand, the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best possible futures, if we have the courage to walk through the door they unexpectedly open. The conference room felt different when James and Richard Hoffman returned 15 minutes later. The confident swagger in Hoffman's step was gone. James looked ashen, his normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. Mrs. Danvers, Hoffman began, his tone more subdued, my client would like to propose a more equitable settlement framework. Patricia nodded. We're listening. Mr. Wilson is prepared to transfer full ownership of the marital home to Mrs. Wilson, along with 50% of all investment and retirement accounts. Regarding Wilson Tech Solutions, we propose a one-time cash payment of $4 million to Mrs. Wilson, representing roughly 20% of the company's current valuation. Rebecca kept her face neutral, though internally she noted the sudden acknowledgement of the company's true value. That's a starting point, Patricia replied. However, it fails to address several key issues. First, my client contributed significantly to Wilson Tech's success, sacrificing her own career advancement. Second, the property purchased for Ms. Diaz using marital funds must be addressed. Third, we have concerns about potential undisclosed assets. James leaned forward. Rebecca, he said, addressing her directly, be reasonable. You know I built that company from the ground up. With my support, Rebecca replied evenly. My connections brought you your first 3 major clients. My income supported us when the company wasn't profitable. My healthcare benefits covered us both for the first 4 years. That doesn't entitle you to half my company, Patricia interjected. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, Mr. Wilson. Courts consider numerous factors, including length of marriage, contributions to marital assets, and misconduct that dissipates marital assets. She tapped the evidence folder. Such as using joint funds to purchase property for a paramour. Hoffman placed a restraining hand on James's arm. What would your client consider acceptable terms? Patricia consulted with Rebecca before responding. 50% of all liquid assets and retirement accounts. Full ownership of the marital home. And either a 30% stake in Wilson Tech Solutions or a one-time payment of $7 million. That's outrageous, James snapped. Is it? Let's consider what a judge might award after seeing evidence of your affair, the property purchase, and your attempt to hide assets. Not to mention the callous manner in which you informed Mrs. Wilson of your desire to end the marriage. We'll need time to consider this proposal, Hoffman finally said. Of course. We'll expect your response by tomorrow noon. After that, our offer expires, and we proceed with litigation. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca spoke directly to James. The security system alert on my phone shows you were at the house again last night, with her. Please remove her belongings from our home by tomorrow morning. James flushed. You're monitoring me now? No, James. I'm protecting what's legally mine until a court determines otherwise. The security company has been instructed to deny entry to anyone except me. I've changed the access codes. She walked out, leaving James sputtering behind her. In the elevator, Rebecca finally allowed herself a shaky breath. You did beautifully, Patricia said. Did you see Hoffman's expression when you mentioned the security system? Back at Megan's apartment, Rebecca found herself exhausted but unable to rest. She sat on the edge of the guest bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what was happening. 15 years of marriage. Gone. The future she had planned. Gone. The trust she had placed in the person she thought would always protect her heart. Shattered. She picked up her phone and called her sister in Chicago. Becca? Emily's voice was instantly concerned. It's not like you to call on a workday. James is having an affair, Rebecca said without preamble. We're getting divorced. The silence lasted only a second before Emily exploded. That absolute bastard. Are you okay? Do you need me to come out there? Rebecca found herself smiling despite everything. Emily, for years younger and more hot-headed, had always been her fiercest defender. I'm handling it, Rebecca assured her. Actually, I'm more than handling it. I might be kind of destroying him. She gave Emily an abbreviated version of the past 24 hours. Holy shit, Becca, Emily breathed. You're my hero. Seriously. I don't feel like a hero, Rebecca admitted. I feel hollow. Of course you do. You've been blindsided by someone you trusted completely. But you know what? That emptiness is going to fill up again. With pride in your strength. With new opportunities. With a life that doesn't include a cheating jackass. Around 7 p.m., Megan returned from her job as a pediatrician, carrying takeout containers. Italian comfort food, she announced. How'd it go with the lawyers? Rebecca filled her in while they ate. I still can't believe James thought he could just text you to disappear from your own life, Megan said, shaking her head. It's like he forgot who you are. I think he saw what he wanted to see, Rebecca replied. The supportive wife. The understanding partner. He never realized those qualities don't equal doormat. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Rebecca, it's Sophia. I know you don't want to hear from me, but there's something you should know about James. Rebecca stared at the message, torn between curiosity and disgust. Is that him? Megan asked. No. It's her. Rebecca turned the phone so Megan could see. Are you going to respond? Rebecca typed a quick reply. Any information relevant to my divorce should be directed to Patricia Danvers at Danvers Legal Group. She had barely set her phone down when it rang, Patricia's office. Rebecca, I've just received a rather unusual call from Sofia Diaz, Patricia said. She's requesting a meeting with us tomorrow. What? Why? She claims to have information about James that's relevant to your case. Normally, I'd dismiss this as manipulation, but she sounded genuinely distressed. Rebecca's mind raced. Do you think we should meet her? Cautiously, yes. Whatever her motivations, information is leverage. I suggested 10 a.m. at my office. I'll have my assistant present to witness everything. After hanging up, she turned to Megan. Apparently, James's girlfriend wants to give us dirt on him. Plot twist, Megan said, raising her eyebrows. Think it's a trap? I don't know, Rebecca admitted. But I'm going to find out. At 9:45 the next morning, Rebecca arrived at Patricia's office, dressed in another power suit. She'd applied her makeup carefully, determined to present strength regardless of how she felt inside. Patricia met her in reception. Sofia Diaz arrived 10 minutes ago. She's quite agitated. In a small conference room, Sofia sat fidgeting with a manila envelope. Rebecca's first thought was that she looked terrible. The polished marketing executive was gone, replaced by a woman with dark circles under her eyes and hair in a hasty ponytail. Mrs. Wilson, Sofia said, standing awkwardly. Thank you for meeting me. Ms. Diaz, Rebecca nodded coldly. You had something to tell us? I didn't know you were married when James and I started seeing each other. He told me he was divorced. Rebecca felt a flash of anger. We've been married for 15 years. You were in my home for Christmas last year. He said you were his ex-wife who he remained friends with. Sophia's voice was small. It sounds stupid now, but he had explanations for everything. Why you still lived together sometimes, co-ownership of the house. Why you still wore wedding rings, they were family heirlooms you both kept. And you believed this elaborate fiction? Sophia flushed. I wanted to believe him. But that's not why I'm here. 2 days ago, after you confronted him, James asked me to sign these. She pushed the manila envelope across the table. Inside were property transfer documents for the lakefront cabin, transferring ownership from Sophia to an LLC called Wilson Ventures. He said it was for tax purposes, Sophia continued. But when I looked up the LLC, it was registered in the Cayman Islands 3 months ago. Patricia examined the papers. This is a shell company. Classic asset hiding strategy. There's more, Sophia said, pulling out her phone. I recorded our conversation yesterday when he was explaining why I needed to sign these. She pressed play. James's voice filled the room. Just sign the papers, Sophia. The cabin needs to be under the LLC before Rebecca's lawyers start digging. I've already moved most of the liquid assets offshore. Once the divorce is final, we can transfer everything back and move forward with our plans. Sophia's voice responded, I don't understand why we need to hide the cabin. You said it was a gift to me. It was, but legally it was purchased with marital assets. If Rebecca finds out, which she apparently already has, she could claim half its value. This way, it's protected. James, this feels wrong. Do you want to start our life together broke? Rebecca's out for blood. She's going to try to take everything I built. I'm just protecting what's ours. Patricia stopped the recording. Ms. Diaz, why are you sharing this with us? Sophia looked down at her hands. Because yesterday, I found out James has been lying to me about more than just his marital status. The money he used to buy the cabin? He told me it came from his personal savings. But I overheard him on the phone, talking about company funds he'd diverted. She looked up at Rebecca. I'm the chief marketing officer. I know that's embezzlement, and I want no part of it. Rebecca felt a cold shock. You're saying he used Wilson Tech company funds, not just our personal marital assets? Sophia nodded. From what I could piece together, yes. There's a separate company account that only James has access to. He called it the Executive Discretionary Fund. Patricia was already making notes. Ms. Diaz, would you be willing to provide a formal statement about this conversation? Yes. And I brought the original cabin purchase documents that show where the money came from. I'm resigning from Wilson Tech today. Rebecca studied the woman across from her. She should hate this woman. Instead, she felt an unexpected twinge of sympathy. Did you love him? The question escaped before Rebecca could stop it. Sophia looked startled. I thought I did. Now I'm not sure I ever knew him. She hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the affair, but for believing his lies about you. He said you were cold, career-obsessed, uninterested in his life. Classic cheater's playbook, Patricia murmured. Rewrite the marriage narrative to justify the affair. After Sophia left, Patricia turned to Rebecca with a grim smile. This changes everything. If James has been embezzling from his own company, that opens up potential criminal liability. At minimum, it gives us leverage to push for a more favorable settlement. What's our next step? I'm going to call Richard Hoffman immediately. The embezzlement allegation is our nuclear option. We don't lead with it, but we make sure they know we have it. By the time Rebecca left Patricia's office, a new meeting had been scheduled with James and his attorney for 4 p.m. that same day. She decided to visit her own house for the first time since receiving James's text. The house was quiet when she arrived, almost eerily so. Rebecca walked through the room slowly, seeing their shared life through new eyes. The wedding photos on the mantel, the kitchen where they'd cooked Sunday dinners. In the master bedroom, she noticed immediate changes. James's cologne missing from the dresser, some of his clothes gone from the closet, and on her pillow, a handwritten note. Rebecca, I know you're angry and hurt. I handled this badly. Let's talk about a fair resolution without letting lawyers take everything we've built. Jay. She crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Then she methodically began gathering important personal items, her jewelry, family photos, crucial documents, and sentimental possessions she couldn't bear to lose if James decided to retaliate. As she packed, Rebecca noticed something odd. James's lockbox was missing from his closet shelf. He'd always kept important documents there, his passport, birth certificate, social security card, and what he'd once referred to as emergency cash. She went to their home office and checked their financial tracking software. She quickly found what she was looking for, a wire transfer from 3 days ago, $50,000 to an account she didn't recognize. Rebecca took screenshots, emailed them to herself and Patricia, then shut down the computer. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Investigator confirmed Wilson Ventures LLC. Also found second offshore entity established last month. Call me. The second entity is called Summit Holdings, Patricia explained when Rebecca called. It received a wire transfer of $250,000 from Wilson Tech Solutions 6 weeks ago, labeled as international consultant fees. No record of any actual consulting services. He's been planning this for months, Rebecca realized. The affair, the divorce, hiding assets, all carefully orchestrated. But his careful planning just became his downfall. We now have documented evidence of what appears to be both hidden marital assets and corporate financial impropriety. The conference room at 4 p.m. felt charged with tension. James and Richard Hoffman arrived precisely on time, both looking considerably more serious than during their previous meeting. Thank you for meeting again so quickly, Patricia began. Has your client had time to consider our settlement proposal? Hoffman nodded. We have a counterproposal. Mr. Wilson is prepared to transfer the marital home, 50% of all investment and retirement accounts, and make a cash payment of $5.5 million for Mrs. Wilson's indirect contributions to Wilson Tech Solutions. Patricia skimmed the document. This is closer to our position, but still inadequate given the circumstances. With all due respect, Hoffman replied, while my client acknowledges his personal failings in the marriage, Mrs. Wilson's claim to Wilson Tech goes beyond what courts typically award. Perhaps, Patricia said, but courts take a particularly dim view of spouses who attempt to hide assets during divorce proceedings, or those who potentially misappropriate company funds for personal use. She laid out the evidence methodically, the property transfer documents for the cabin, the formation papers for Wilson Ventures LLC, bank records showing transfers to the Cayman Islands, and documentation of the Executive Discretionary Fund. With each new document, James's face grew paler. Richard Hoffman's expression morphed from confidence to dismay to barely concealed fury, directed not at Patricia or Rebecca, but at his own client. "Mrs. Danvers," Hoffman said, "may I request a brief recess to confer with my client?" In the hallway outside, Rebecca leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "He really thought he'd get away with all of it." "They usually do," Patricia replied. "Men like James Wilson are used to controlling narratives. They simply cannot conceive of losing control." 10 minutes stretched to 20. Finally, Hoffman opened the door, his professional demeanor barely masking his evident anger. "We're prepared to accept your original settlement terms," he announced flatly. "All of them?" Patricia clarified. "The home, 50% of liquid assets, and either 30% ownership of Wilson Tech or $7 million? "Yes," Hoffman confirmed, "with one additional condition: complete confidentiality regarding all matters discussed in these proceedings." Patricia smiled thinly. "We'll need to add our own conditions. First, full financial disclosure, verified by our forensic accountant. Second, Mr. Wilson must replenish any company funds that were improperly diverted for personal use." Hoffman glanced back at James, who gave a terse nod. "Agreed. We'll have the settlement agreement drafted by tomorrow." As they returned to outline the terms, Rebecca found herself looking directly at James. The man across the table wasn't the charming, confident husband she'd known for 15 years. He looked diminished somehow, cornered and desperate. James met her gaze briefly, then looked away. In that moment, Rebecca realized something important: she no longer loved him. The pain was still there, the sense of betrayal sharp as ever, but the love that had sustained her through 15 years of marriage had vanished completely. It wasn't just his infidelity that had killed it, but the calculated cruelty of his exit strategy, the text message dismissal, the immediate installment of Sophia in their home, the elaborate financial deception. He had revealed himself to be someone she could never have loved had she known the truth from the beginning. As the lawyers outlined the settlement terms, Rebecca felt something unexpected bloom inside her chest. Not happiness, that would come later. Not closure, that was still a distant shore. No, what she felt in that moment was the first flicker of freedom. The meeting concluded with handshakes between the attorneys. James attempted to approach Rebecca as they left, but she deliberately turned away, walking out with Patricia. "It's over," Patricia said as they rode the elevator down. "The paperwork will take a few weeks, but essentially, it's done." Rebecca nodded, a complex mixture of emotions washing through her. "I never expected it to resolve so quickly." "Most divorces don't," Patricia acknowledged. "But most divorces don't involve such clear evidence of misconduct." Outside the building, Rebecca took a deep breath of spring air, feeling as though she'd been underwater for days. "What happens now?" she asked, suddenly unsure of her next steps. Patricia smiled, her grandmotherly face kind. "Now, my dear, you begin rebuilding. One day at a time." 6 weeks later, Rebecca stood in her newly purchased downtown Boston condominium, watching the movers arrange her furniture. The spacious corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the harbor that still took her breath away each morning. "Where would you like this box, ma'am?" a mover asked, holding a container labeled photos. "In the study, please," Rebecca replied. She had decided not to unpack those just yet, the framed memories of 15 years with James. Eventually she would sort through them, keeping those with friends and family, discarding the rest. But not today. Her phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Housewarming dinner still on for tonight? Should I bring anything besides champagne?" Rebecca smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. Just champagne and good vibes." Emily arrives at 6. Emily had flown in from Chicago to help her sister settle into her new place and new life. The divorce had been finalized with remarkable speed, thanks to James's eagerness to avoid further scrutiny of his financial dealings. Rebecca had taken the $7 million settlement rather than partial ownership of Wilson Tech. A clean break felt more important than ongoing entanglement. As the movers completed their work, Rebecca wandered through her new home. She had selected every piece herself, the sleek modern furniture a deliberate departure from the traditional style she had shared with James. The place was smaller than their Brookline home, but it was entirely hers. No compromises, no memories lurking in corners. Her phone rang, Patricia Danvers calling. "Rebecca, I've just received an interesting call from Richard Hoffman," Patricia said after their initial greetings. "James isn't contesting something, is he?" Rebecca asked, immediately tensing. No, quite the opposite. He wants to know if you'd consider signing additional confidentiality agreements regarding the offshore accounts and the cabin purchase. Apparently, the company is in talks with a major investor, and they're conducting extensive due diligence. Rebecca sat on her new sofa, considering this. What would these additional agreements entail? Essentially, you'd promise never to discuss those specific financial matters with anyone, particularly business journalists or competing firms. In exchange, he's offering an additional $500,000. He's still worried I'll expose him, Rebecca realized. Even after everything is settled. Men like James never truly believe they'll face consequences, Patricia replied. They're always looking for insurance. What do you advise? From a purely financial perspective, it's easy money for signing a document. From an ethical standpoint, Patricia paused. Well, that's a more personal decision. After they hung up, Rebecca walked to her windows, gazing out at the harbor. James was still trying to control the narrative, to ensure his secrets remained buried. $500,000 to maintain her silence. Her doorbell rang, Emily, arriving early with what appeared to be several shopping bags. I couldn't resist, her sister announced, sweeping in and dropping the bags on the kitchen island. Housewarming essentials, wine glasses, premium coffee, and the most ridiculously expensive scented candles I could find. Rebecca laughed, embracing her. You're amazing. And early. The hotel room was depressing, and I figured you could use help unpacking. Emily glanced around admiringly. This place is spectacular, Becca. Seriously. It's starting to feel like home, Rebecca admitted. Emily began unpacking her purchases. So what's new? Any word from the jackass? Rebecca told her about Patricia's call. Emily's expression darkened. He's still trying to manipulate you, she said, shaking her head. Buying your silence now. It's just business for him, Rebecca replied. The company is everything. His reputation is everything. What are you going to do? I haven't decided. Part of me thinks I should just take the money. It's a significant sum for signing a piece of paper. Another part feels like it would be giving him control again, in some small way. Emily arranged the new wine glasses on a shelf. Remember what you told me last month? That the most important thing you gained from this divorce wasn't the money, but your self-respect? Rebecca nodded. The conversation had been during a late-night phone call, shortly after the settlement was finalized. Well, Emily continued, what feels more respectful to yourself, taking his hush money, or making your decision independent of his needs? Before Rebecca could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Rebecca, it's Sophia Diaz. Could we meet for coffee? There's something important you should know. Rebecca showed the message to Emily, whose eyebrows shot up. The mistress strikes again. What could she possibly want now? I don't know, Rebecca admitted. But she did provide crucial evidence for the settlement. Out of self-interest, Emily reminded her. She was worried about being implicated in his financial schemes. True. Rebecca considered for a moment, then typed a response. I'm busy settling into my new place. What is this regarding? The reply came quickly. The investor group looking at Wilson Tech James is misrepresenting the company's value. I thought you should know before you sign anything else. Rebecca's pulse quickened. She showed the message to Emily. How would she even know you're being asked to sign anything? Emily asked suspiciously. Good question. Rebecca called Patricia. Did you discuss James's request for additional confidentiality with anyone besides me? Rebecca asked when the attorney answered. Absolutely not, Patricia replied firmly. Why do you ask? Rebecca explained Sophia's text. Patricia was silent for a moment. That's concerning on several levels, she finally said. First, it suggests information is leaking from somewhere, either Hoffman's office or James himself. Second, if what she's suggesting is true, James may be committing securities fraud. Should I meet with her? Cautiously, yes. But in a public place, and I'd suggest recording the conversation with her knowledge and consent. Massachusetts is a two-party state, remember. After hanging up, Rebecca texted Sophia back. I can meet tomorrow at Thinking Cup on Newberry, 10 a.m. We'll be recording our conversation for my records. That's fine, came Sophia's reply. I have nothing to hide. Unlike James. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at the coffee shop early, selecting a table in the corner where their conversation wouldn't be easily overheard. She wore a simple black dress with a camel-colored blazer, professional but not intimidating. She wanted Sophia to feel comfortable sharing whatever information she had. Sophia arrived precisely at 10, looking markedly different from their last encounter. She was polished again, her dark hair styled in a sleek bob, wearing a tailored pantsuit that suggested a woman who had regained her footing. Thank you for meeting me, Sophia said as she sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I'm curious what you think I should know, Rebecca replied, placing her phone on the table. I'm recording now, as I mentioned. Sophia nodded. That's fine. I'll get straight to the point. James is in talks with Vertex Capital about a major investment in Wilson Tech. The deal would value the company at $40 million. Rebecca kept her expression neutral, though internally she was stunned. That's double the valuation from 2 months ago. Exactly. And completely fraudulent. Sophia opened her bag and removed a folder. These are internal projections James created specifically for Vertex. They show revenue growth of 35% year-over-year for the past 3 years. She slid the documents across the table. Rebecca examined them briefly. The actual growth was closer to 20%, Sophia continued. Still impressive, but not the hockey stick curve he's presenting. Rebecca looked up. How do you have access to these? I'm still in contact with people at Wilson Tech. The CFO is an old friend who's increasingly uncomfortable with James's methods. Sophia hesitated. There's more. James has been booking phantom sales to inflate current quarter revenues. Contracts that don't actually exist. That's securities fraud, Rebecca said quietly. Yes. And the reason I'm telling you this is because he's apparently asked you to sign additional confidentiality agreements about his financial activities. If you do, and this scheme collapses, you could potentially be viewed as complicit. Rebecca studied Sophia carefully. Why are you really doing this? Sophia met her gaze directly. Partially to protect myself. I've given a statement to your lawyer about what I knew, but I want to be completely clear that I had no involvement in or knowledge of these new financial manipulations. And the other part? Sophia looked down at her coffee cup. Guilt, probably. Accountability. I participated in the destruction of your marriage. I can't undo that, but I can at least ensure you don't get caught in James's newest deception. Rebecca was silent for a moment, processing this information and Sophia's apparent sincerity. Have you taken this information to anyone else? The board of Wilson Tech? Regulators? Not yet, Sophia admitted. I wanted to speak with you first, given your recent settlement, but I'm considering it. You understand that could destroy the company? I do. But James's actions are going to destroy it anyway, eventually. It's just a question of how many people get hurt in the process. After Sophia left, Rebecca remained at the table, thinking. If what Sophia had shared was accurate, and the documentation certainly looked legitimate, James was on a self-destructive path that could end in criminal charges. And he wanted Rebecca contractually bound to silence before it all exploded. She called Patricia and explained everything, forwarding photos she had taken of Sophia's documents. This is extremely serious, Patricia said. If authenticated, this information suggests criminal activity. I strongly advise against signing any additional agreements with James. In fact, we should consider whether you have any legal obligation to report this information. Would that nullify our settlement? No, your settlement is final and based on circumstances and knowledge at that time. But there's a moral question here as well. Rebecca thought about the investors being misled, the employees whose careers and livelihoods would be affected when the truth emerged. She thought about James, still believing he could manipulate outcomes, control narratives, escape consequences. I need to think about this, she told Patricia. Can you verify these documents somehow? I'll have my investigator look into them. In the meantime, don't respond to James or Hoffman about the confidentiality request. That evening, Rebecca hosted her housewarming dinner as planned. Emily, Megan, and 2 colleagues from Morgan Stanley filled her new home with conversation and laughter. She tried to push thoughts of James and his potential legal troubles aside, focusing instead on the friends who had supported her through the darkest period of her life. A toast, Emily announced, raising her champagne glass. To new beginnings, to freedom, and to my sister, the strongest woman I know. To Rebecca, the others echoed, glasses clinking. Later, after her guests had departed and Emily had returned to her hotel, Rebecca sat on her balcony overlooking the twinkling lights of Boston Harbor. Her phone buzzed with an email from Patricia. My investigator spoke with a former Wilson Tech finance employee. The documents appear legitimate. James has been systematically misrepresenting company finances for at least 6 months. The Vertex Capital deal is scheduled to close next week. We need to discuss your options tomorrow. Rebecca stared at the message for a long time. Then she made a decision that surprised even herself. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want to be the instrument of James's destruction, even if he deserved it. What she wanted, more than anything, was to be free of him completely, not bound by either resentment or confidentiality agreements. She typed a reply to Patricia. I will not sign any additional agreements. As for the potential fraud, I believe we have an ethical obligation to notify the appropriate authorities. Let's discuss specifics tomorrow. With that, she put down her phone and looked out at the harbor. For the first time since receiving that text ordering her not to come home, Rebecca felt truly at peace with her decisions. James had set in motion his own downfall long before she discovered his deception. All she had done was refuse to be its victim. The next morning, Rebecca met with Patricia to discuss their approach. They agreed that Rebecca would provide the information to the Securities and Exchange Commission through their whistleblower program, which would protect her identity while allowing investigators to examine James's activities. Once we submit this, Patricia cautioned, we can't control what happens next. The SEC might investigate quietly, or they might move quickly with visible enforcement actions. I understand, Rebecca said, but I can't knowingly allow investors to be defrauded. As they were completing the SEC submission forms, Patricia's phone rang. Her expression changed as she listened to the caller. When? She asked, making notes. I see. Yes, she's with me now. We'll discuss it. After hanging up, Patricia looked up at Rebecca. That was my contact at the State Attorney General's office. They've just received a whistleblower complaint about Wilson Tech Solutions. Specifically, about James Wilson's financial practices. Someone beat us to it, Rebecca realized. Sophia? Possibly, or perhaps the CFO she mentioned. Either way, the complaint has triggered a preliminary investigation. Trading of Wilson Tech's existing shares has been suspended pending review. Rebecca's phone began buzzing with text notifications. Former colleagues at Wilson Tech were messaging her about the trading suspension, wondering if she knew anything. Then came a text from James himself, the first direct communication since their final settlement meeting. Did you do this? Everything we built is being destroyed. I hope you're satisfied. Rebecca showed the message to Patricia, who shook her head in disbelief. Still blaming others for consequences of his own actions, she remarked. Classic. Should I respond? Absolutely not. Any communication could be misconstrued at this point. Rebecca nodded, then blocked James's number. That simple action, preventing him from reaching her directly, felt surprisingly empowering. Over the next few days, the story broke in the financial press. The SEC and state authorities were investigating Wilson Tech Solutions for potential securities fraud and financial misrepresentation. Vertex Capital had withdrawn from acquisition talks. The company's stock, when trading resumed, had lost over 60% of its value. Rebecca watched the situation unfold from a distance, neither gloating nor regretful. She had taken her settlement in cash rather than company equity, a decision that now seemed almost prescient. She had moved on with her life, focusing on her career and rebuilding her social circle. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the investigation became public, Rebecca received a call from an unfamiliar number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Rebecca. It was Richard Hoffman, James's attorney. I was hoping we might speak briefly. Mr. Hoffman, I have nothing to discuss with you or your client, Rebecca replied firmly. James is no longer my client, Hoffman said, surprising her. I've withdrawn from representing him in light of recent events. This call is actually of a more personal nature. Rebecca remained silent, waiting. I want to apologize, he continued. When I first took James's case, I believed his version of events. That you were being unreasonable, vindictive. I've since come to understand that wasn't the case. Why are you telling me this? Professional integrity, I suppose. I've been practicing family law for 30 years, Mrs. Wilson. I've represented my share of difficult clients. But I've never encountered someone who lied so comprehensively to their own counsel. It was a humbling experience. After the call ended, Rebecca felt a strange sense of closure. Hoffman's apology wasn't particularly important to her, but it represented something significant, objective acknowledgement that she had been wronged, that her response hadn't been vindictive or excessive, but reasonable and justified. That evening, she sat on her balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset over Boston Harbor. Her phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Have you seen the news? James just resigned as CEO. Board appointed interim leadership pending investigation results. Rebecca hadn't seen it, but she wasn't surprised. The walls were closing in on James as the consequences of his choices became impossible to escape. Just saw it, she replied to Megan. Not sure how to feel about it all. Vindicated? Relieved? Indifferent? Megan suggested. Rebecca considered this. Maybe a little of each. Mostly I'm just glad to be on the other side of it all. And she was. The painful text that had once shattered her world now seemed like a distant memory, the beginning of a difficult journey that had ultimately led her to a better place. James had meant to discard her with those 11 cold words. Instead, he had inadvertently freed her to discover her own strength. A week later, Rebecca was meeting with a client when her assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Patricia Danvers was on the phone and insisted it couldn't wait. Rebecca excused herself and took the call in her private office. "Rebecca, I wanted you to hear this from me first," Patricia began. "James Wilson has been arrested on securities fraud charges. The SEC found evidence of falsified financial records going back over a year." Rebecca sank into her chair. "Arrested? I didn't expect it to move this quickly." The evidence was apparently overwhelming once they started looking. Multiple employees came forward after the initial complaint. "It seems your ex-husband had created quite an elaborate fiction." After hanging up, Rebecca sat motionless, absorbing this development. James, who had built his company and reputation on projected strength and success, was now facing criminal charges. The man who had dismissively texted her not to come home was now being led to a different kind of temporary housing. She felt no satisfaction, no vindictive pleasure. Only a profound sense of how drastically life could change, how completely the mighty could fall, and how grateful she was to have escaped before the collapse. That evening, Emily called from Chicago. "I just saw the news about James," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Strangely detached," Rebecca admitted. "Like I'm watching a movie about someone else's life." "That's probably healthy," Emily observed. "It means you've really moved on." "I think I have," Rebecca agreed. "For the first time in months, I went a whole day without thinking about him or the divorce until Patricia called." "That's progress." "Speaking of progress, any updates on that promotion?" Rebecca smiled. In the midst of everything, she had thrown herself into her work at Morgan Stanley, earning recognition from senior management and consideration for a director position. "Final interviews next week," she said. "I think my chances are good." After they hung up, Rebecca walked through her condo, appreciating the space she had created for herself. The furniture arranged exactly as she wanted. The art she had selected that reflected her own taste. The quiet that wasn't loneliness but peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Just a reminder that reporters may try to contact you about James's arrest. You're under no obligation to speak with them. Refer all inquiries to me." Rebecca appreciated the attorney's ongoing protectiveness, but she wasn't concerned. The press had already tried reaching her when the investigation first became public, and she had maintained her silence. She had no intention of becoming part of the narrative now. 3 days later, Rebecca was leaving her office when she noticed a familiar figure waiting near the building entrance. Sophia Diaz, looking nervous but determined. "I'm sorry to ambush you like this," Sophia said as Rebecca approached. "I called your office, but they wouldn't put me through." "What do you want, Sophia?" Rebecca asked, not unkindly but with clear boundaries. "I wanted to tell you in person, I was the one who filed the whistleblower complaint against James. Not because of you or anything related to our situation, but because it was the right thing to do." Rebecca studied her face. "Why tell me this?" "Because I thought you might wonder if you caused what's happening to James now." "You didn't. His own actions did." Sophia shifted uncomfortably. "And I suppose I wanted you to know that people can change. Can try to be better than their worst mistakes." After a moment, Rebecca nodded. "I appreciate you telling me. I hope you find what you're looking for, Sophia." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, some betrayals went too deep for that, but it was acknowledgement of Sophia's attempt at amends. As Rebecca walked away, she felt the last weight of her past with James lifting from her shoulders. The future stretched before her, unwritten and full of possibility. A future that had seemed unimaginable in that grocery store aisle when she'd first read those 11 cruel words. A future she had fought for and won, not just with legal strategies and financial settlements, but with courage and self-respect. His text had told her not to come home. In the end, she had built a better one. 1 year to the day after James's infamous text, Rebecca stood in her office at Morgan Stanley, admiring her newly installed nameplate, Rebecca Wilson, Managing Director. The promotion had come through 3 months after James's arrest, recognition of both her financial acumen and her leadership during a challenging period. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, dinner with Emily, who had flown in from Chicago to celebrate what they now jokingly called Rebecca's Independence Day. As she gathered her things to leave, her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Wilson, there's a delivery for you." She handed Rebecca a small package wrapped in brown paper. Rebecca examined it cautiously. The return address was Patricia Danvers's law office. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note from Patricia. "Rebecca. The trial transcripts were just released. Thought you might want these for closure. James was sentenced to 5 years this morning. Call if you want to discuss. Patricia. Rebecca slipped the USB drive into her desk drawer. Perhaps she would look at it someday, but not today. Today was about celebrating how far she had come, not revisiting the past. The restaurant Emily had chosen was upscale without being stuffy, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. Rebecca arrived to find her sister already seated, champagne on ice beside the table. There she is, the powerhouse, Emily exclaimed, rising to embrace Rebecca. Managing Director Wilson, ready to take over the financial world. Rebecca laughed, settling into her chair. One step at a time. How was your flight? Fine, but never mind that. Today is about you. Emily poured champagne for both of them. 1 year ago, you were standing in a grocery store with your world falling apart. And look at you now. Rebecca raised her glass. To unexpected new beginnings. And to jackasses who accidentally do us favors by showing their true colors, Emily added with a grin. As they clinked glasses, Rebecca felt a surge of gratitude for her sister's unwavering support. Emily had been her rock throughout the divorce, offering both practical help and emotional sustenance when Rebecca needed it most. I got something in the mail today, Rebecca said after they ordered. The trial transcripts. James was sentenced to 5 years. Emily's eyes widened. Wow. That's significant for white-collar crime. How do you feel about it? Rebecca considered the question. Detached, mostly. It's like hearing about a distant acquaintance's troubles. Sad in an abstract way, but not personally affecting. That's healthy, Emily nodded. Means you've truly moved on. I have, Rebecca agreed, though I'm still processing some things, like how I missed so many warning signs over the years. The waiter arrived with their appetizers, momentarily pausing the conversation. After he left, Emily leaned forward. You missed them because you trusted him. That's not a character flaw, Becca. No, but there's a difference between trust and willful blindness. Rebecca sipped her champagne. I ignored things that, in retrospect, were obvious red flags. The password-protected phone. The unexplained expenses. The way he gradually stopped including me in business discussions. Hindsight is always clearer, Emily reminded her. And relationships require trust. You can't live in constant suspicion. Rebecca smiled wryly. Says the woman who makes all her boyfriends submit to a background check. That's not suspicion, that's due diligence, Emily countered with a laugh. And may I remind you, it's kept me out of trouble more than once. Their main courses arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics, Emily's new promotion at her architectural firm, their plans to vacation together in Italy later that year, their parents' upcoming anniversary celebration. Over dessert, Emily asked the question she'd been tactfully avoiding all evening. So, any developments in the romance department? It's been a year, and you're officially a catch. Rebecca shook her head. Not ready. Maybe not for a while yet. That's fair, Emily acknowledged. But don't let what James did make you close off that part of your life forever. It's not that, Rebecca said thoughtfully. I'm just enjoying being on my own right now, learning who I am without defining myself in relation to someone else. As they left the restaurant, Emily linked her arm through Rebecca's. Well, whoever you are, I'm pretty impressed with her. Back in her condo that night, Rebecca stood on her balcony gazing at the harbor lights. 1 year. It seemed both an eternity and an instant. She thought about the woman she had been that day in the grocery store, devastated, disbelieving, feeling as though her life had ended. How could she have known then that James's cruel dismissal would become the catalyst for the most transformative year of her life? Her phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Just heard the news about James's sentencing. You okay? Rebecca typed back, more than okay. Having a lovely evening celebrating with Emily. Talk tomorrow? Megan's reply came quickly, perfect. And don't forget Saturday's charity gala. You promised to be my +1. Rebecca smiled, remembering her commitment to attend the Children's Hospital fundraiser where Megan would be receiving an award for her pediatric work. Turning back to the view, Rebecca reflected on how her social circle had evolved over the past year. Some couple friends had drifted away after the divorce, taking James's side or simply uncomfortable with the changed dynamic. But others, like Megan, had drawn closer, revealing the depth and authenticity of those relationships. She had also formed new friendships, with colleagues who had supported her professionally during the turmoil, with neighbors in her building, with other members of the divorce support group Patricia had recommended in those early, raw days. Her life felt richer now, more authentically hers. The path forward wasn't always clear, but it was hers to determine. The next morning, Rebecca woke to an email from Richard Hoffman, James's former attorney. Ms. Wilson. I imagine you've heard about the sentencing. While I'm no longer representing your ex-husband, I felt compelled to reach out. During yesterday's proceedings, James made a statement to the court that I thought might interest you. He acknowledged the harm he caused not just to investors, but to you personally. It seemed, perhaps for the first time, genuinely remorseful. This isn't meant to change anything between you, merely to provide a possible piece of closure. Respectfully, Richard Hoffman. Rebecca read the email twice, unsure what to make of it. Was James truly remorseful, or simply performing contrition for the judge in hopes of a lighter sentence? And even if his remorse was genuine, did it matter after everything he had done? She decided it didn't, at least not in any way that affected her life now. Whatever evolution James might be experiencing in the face of consequences was his journey, not hers. At work that day, Rebecca found herself unusually productive, as if the news of James's sentencing had cleared the final lingering cobwebs from her mind. She conducted 2 client meetings, finalized a major investment strategy, and mentored a promising young financial advisor on her team. Her assistant knocked on her door late in the afternoon. "Ms. Wilson, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." She handed Rebecca a business card. "Barbara Chen, SEC Enforcement Division." Rebecca frowned, confused. "Send her in, please." Barbara Chen was a compact woman with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. She shook Rebecca's hand firmly. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment, Ms. Wilson. I apologize for the interruption, but I wanted to speak with you personally rather than through official channels." Of course, Rebecca gestured to the chairs in front of her desk. "How can I help you?" As you may know, the Securities and Exchange Commission has been conducting a thorough investigation of Wilson Tech Solutions following James Wilson's fraud conviction. Rebecca nodded. She had followed the case through news reports, though she had deliberately maintained her distance from the details. "What you may not know," Chin continued, "is that our investigation has uncovered a pattern of misconduct dating back nearly 3 years. We've been interviewing former employees, board members, and others connected to the company." Rebecca tensed slightly. "I've been divorced from James for a year now. I'm not sure what insight I could offer." "Actually, it's not information we're seeking," Chin said. "It's recognition. The whistleblower complaint that initially triggered our investigation was crucial. Without it, James Wilson might have successfully completed the Vertex Capital fraud, hurting countless additional investors." She placed a folder on Rebecca's desk. "This is a formal acknowledgement from the SEC's whistleblower office. While we understand you prefer to remain anonymous publicly, we wanted you to know that your actions prevented substantial financial harm." Rebecca stared at the folder, momentarily speechless. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I wasn't the initial whistleblower." Chen looked surprised. "Our records indicate that a detailed complaint was filed from your attorney's office, with documentation that could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of both Wilson Tech's finances and James Wilson's personal accounts." "That wasn't me," Rebecca said firmly. "I was planning to file a complaint after receiving information about the fraud, but someone else beat me to it. I assumed it was Sofia Diaz or perhaps someone from the company's finance department." Chen's expression shifted to one of professional neutrality. "I see. Perhaps there was a miscommunication. In any case, the acknowledgement stands for your cooperation during the investigation." After Chen left, Rebecca sat at her desk, puzzled. She was certain she hadn't filed the initial whistleblower complaint. Sophia had claimed responsibility when they spoke outside Rebecca's office months ago. But Chen seemed equally certain the complaint had originated from Patricia's firm. She dialed Patricia's number. "Did you file an SEC whistleblower complaint on my behalf?" Rebecca asked when the attorney answered. Patricia was silent for a moment. "Not exactly. When Sofia Diaz provided those documents about James's financial misrepresentations, I had my investigator verify them immediately. The evidence was compelling and suggested ongoing fraud that could harm many people." "So you filed the complaint?" "I consulted with ethics counsel about my professional obligations. Given the documentation we possessed and the imminent Vertex deal, there was a clear duty to prevent ongoing fraud." Patricia paused. "I had prepared the whistleblower submission for your review, but before we could file it formally, I learned the SEC had already received a complaint with similar information." "From whom?" "That's the interesting part. My investigator's SEC contact wouldn't confirm the source, but hinted it came from Richard Hoffman's office." "James's own attorney reported him?" Rebecca was incredulous. "Attorneys have ethical obligations that supersede client confidentiality in certain circumstances, specifically, when they have knowledge of ongoing fraud. If Hoffman discovered James was actively defrauding investors, he would have faced an ethical dilemma, withdraw from representation and report, or become potentially complicit. Rebecca thought about Hoffman's unexpected call after withdrawing from James's case, his comment about professional integrity. So everyone was trying to stop James, she mused. His lawyer, his girlfriend, his finance team, and me. People have different thresholds for tolerating deception, Patricia observed. James crossed all of them. After hanging up, Rebecca opened her desk drawer and looked at the USB drive containing the trial transcripts. Perhaps it was time to review them after all, not to revisit her pain, but to understand the full scope of what had happened, how James's deceptions had finally collapsed under their own weight. The charity gala on Saturday evening was elegant without being ostentatious, appropriate for an event benefiting a children's hospital. Rebecca wore a midnight blue gown that she had purchased specifically for the occasion, another small act of self-definition in her post-James life. Megan found her near the entrance, resplendent in emerald green. "You look amazing," she said, embracing Rebecca. "Thanks for coming. These events are always better with backup." "Happy to support the cause," Rebecca replied. "And to see you receive your much-deserved recognition." They entered the ballroom, which had been transformed with soft lighting and tasteful decorations. Rebecca recognized several faces from Boston's business and medical communities, including a few former associates of James. She felt a momentary tension, wondering if they would be awkward around her, but the first few greetings were warm and genuine. "Rebecca Wilson," a voice called from nearby. She turned to see Thomas Blackwell, one of Boston's most prominent investment bankers and a former client of Wilson Tech. "Wonderful to see you. I've been meaning to reach out." "Mr. Blackwell," Rebecca smiled, extending her hand. "It's been a while." "Too long," he agreed. "And please, it's Thomas. I hear congratulations are in order, managing director at Morgan Stanley, quite an achievement." "Thank you. It's been an eventful year." Blackwell's expression grew more serious. "I can imagine. I want you to know that many of us in the business community distinguish completely between you and the situation with James. Your professional reputation remains impeccable." Rebecca was touched by his directness. "I appreciate that, Thomas. It means a lot. In fact," he continued, "Blackwell Partners is looking to diversify our wealth management relationships. Perhaps we could discuss potential synergies with Morgan Stanley?" "No pressure, of course." "I'd be delighted," Rebecca replied, genuinely surprised by the business overture. As the evening progressed, Rebecca had similar conversations with several other attendees, expressions of respect for her professional standing, subtle indications of business opportunities, and a clear message that she wasn't defined by her ex-husband's disgrace. During dinner, she found herself seated next to Dr. Jonathan Hayes, the hospital's chief of pediatric surgery and the evening's keynote speaker. Their conversation flowed easily from hospital funding challenges to market trends to their shared love of sailing. "Do you still get out on the water?" he asked. "Boston Harbor has some excellent day sailing." "Not as much as I'd like," Rebecca admitted. "It's been a while since I've had time." "The hospital maintains a small sailboat for staff use," Jonathan mentioned, "part of our wellness program. You'd be welcome to join me sometime, as Megan's friend." The offer was friendly rather than flirtatious, but Rebecca found herself considering it seriously. Sailing had been a passion before her marriage, one she had gradually abandoned as James's preferences took precedence. "I might take you up on that," she said. "I miss being on the water." Later, as they applauded Megan's gracious acceptance speech, Jonathan leaned over. "I meant what I said about sailing. No pressure, just an open invitation for whenever you're ready." Rebecca smiled. "I'll keep it in mind." After the gala, as Megan and Rebecca shared an Uber home, Megan gave her friend a speculative look. "So, you and Jonathan seem to hit it off." "We had a nice conversation," Rebecca acknowledged. "He offered to take me sailing. And? He's brilliant, kind, divorced for 3 years, and not remotely intimidated by successful women." Rebecca laughed. "Are you matchmaking, Dr. Harrison?" "Merely presenting relevant data points," Megan replied innocently. "What you do with that information is entirely up to you." "I'm not sure I'm ready," Rebecca admitted. "But I did enjoy talking with him." "That's a start," Megan said softly. "And there's no timeline for these things. Just promise me you won't let what happened with James close you off to possibilities forever." "I promise," Rebecca said, realizing she meant it. "When I'm ready." The following week brought a cascade of developments. 3 new clients reached out to Rebecca directly, specifically requesting her as their financial advisor. Morgan Stanley's executive committee invited her to join a strategic planning task force. And Patricia called with news about Wilson Tech. "The company has filed for bankruptcy protection," Patricia explained. Without James's leadership and under the cloud of the fraud charges, they couldn't recover investor confidence. What about the employees? Rebecca asked, thinking of the many people she had known there. Most of the technical teams have been hired by competitors. The board members resigned. The assets will likely be sold off piecemeal. It was the final chapter in the Wilson Tech story, a company that had once represented the future Rebecca and James were building together, now dissolving into corporate history. That evening, Rebecca finally found the emotional bandwidth to review the trial transcripts on the USB drive Patricia had sent. She poured a glass of wine and settled on her sofa, laptop open. The legal proceedings were largely technical, focused on the mechanisms of James's fraud rather than personal matters. But toward the end, she found what Hoffman had referenced, James's statement to the court before sentencing. "Your Honor," James had said, "I stand before you having lost everything that ever mattered to me, my company, my reputation, my freedom. But my greatest regret is the pain I caused to those who trusted me, particularly my former wife, Rebecca. When I sent her that text telling her not to come home, I was trying to control the narrative, to end things on my terms. I never imagined she would respond with such dignity and strength, or that my actions would be exposed so completely. I can't undo the harm I've caused. I can only acknowledge it and hope that someday, those I've hurt might find it in their hearts to forgive me, though I know I don't deserve it." Rebecca closed the laptop, unsure what to feel. The statement seemed sincere, yet also self-serving, typical James, finding the most advantageous posture even in disgrace. But it didn't matter. Whatever journey James was on now, genuine remorse or calculated performance, it had no bearing on Rebecca's life. She had moved beyond needing his apology or acknowledgement. She walked to her balcony and looked out at the harbor, thinking about Jonathan's sailing invitation, the new clients, the expanding horizons of her career. The future stretched before her, bright with possibility. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emily, "Just checking on you after the sentencing news. You doing okay?" Rebecca smiled and typed back, "Better than okay. I think I might take up sailing again." Emily's response came quickly, "That's my girl. Always moving forward. Moving forward." That was exactly right. 1 year ago, a cruel text message had shattered Rebecca's world. Now she understood it had actually set her free, free to discover her own strength, rebuild on her own terms, and chart a course toward a future infinitely more authentic than the life she had lost. James had texted her not to come home, thinking he was discarding her from his life. Instead, he had inadvertently launched her toward a life that was truly her own, a life she wouldn't trade for anything, not even the comfortable illusion of their marriage. Rebecca raised her wine glass in a silent toast to unexpected journeys and the strength she had found along the way. Then she set the glass down, picked up her phone, and composed a text to Jonathan Hayes, "I'd like to take you up on that sailing invitation. When works for you?" It was time to feel the wind in her hair again, to chart a new course, one completely of her own choosing.